Welcome back to the Kentucky History Podcast. I'm your host, Jamison Cable, and I'm here with a very special guest, one I've been looking forward to, the New York Times bestselling author and Kentucky native, most importantly, Miss Kim Michele Richardson. Thank you for joining us. How are you doing today?
Hi, Jamison. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
You've written many books over the years, but today we are going to talk about two. One of the ones you've just released, and the book before that, The Bookwoman's Daughter, which is a sequel, standalone historical fiction novel to the first book, The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. Me personally, I am just blown away by both of these books, but before we get into those too much, tell us a little bit about your Kentucky connection and so forth.
Well, I'm a Kentuckian my whole life, native Kentuckian, and I've set all my books in my home state. And so it's just always a privilege to be able to share my stories with people around the United States and elsewhere. And to lift up and honor my Kentuckian.
Well, that's very true. And one thing I'm sure we'll get into, Kentucky roots are awesome, and
Yeah.
the deeper your Kentucky roots are, probably the cooler you are, I guess, in my book. But
There is a nook or cranny I probably haven't visited in Kentucky.
well, that's pretty good. I guess that's one of my life goals is getting to all 120 counties. I've been to quite a few, but I
You
just
know,
haven't had a reason to go to Robertson County yet.
well, when
It's
I
a
was
small.
young and a teen, I started going to every state park in Kentucky. I would just spend my weekends,
Cool.
as a teen,
Yeah. Hmm.
19, 18. That was my favorite to do that. Just pack up what you thought you needed and jump in this old battered Nissan. Uh, yeah, it was, or my Mazda, little Mazda, tore up Mazda, and just hit the back roads. And I just loved it, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm probably a little biased, but Kentucky is the best state. I mean, definitely the most beautiful state. One of the places you can go to caves, mountains, you know,
Ah,
beautiful
yeah.
farmland, everything.
Oh,
Kentucky's
yeah.
got it all.
And just a land rich in folklore and steeped in tradition. It is one of the most beautiful places in the world, as far as I'm concerned.
Which we may be a little bit biased, but
I
it's
think
okay.
so, but that's okay. I've been to other
um,
places too, but that's me.
well, so you mentioned earlier, all your books are based in Kentucky. What what really moved you to go with the first book? And well, I'll ask another question, and then we can go back to that question. The second book is a sequel, but a standalone. What's the difference in there? Because some people might see this book and I have to read the first one. And to me, you don't really have to do that. But what was your kind of take on that?
No, you really don't have to. It can be read as a standalone, and we hope, of course, you'll like it enough to read the first one. But you absolutely, I'm having readers, love it without having read, and then they're, of course, going back to the Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek, and the Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. I actually began that journey now almost 8 years ago,
Wow.
and it sold in 2017 to the publisher. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined it mirrored today's tumultuous and charged world. It was, because these pack horse librarians, they suffered so much. They were, their treacherous landscapes, poverty, starvation, prejudices, unrest, the bloody coal mine wars, and all during the Depression, and had to grow this program that the Pike Horse librarians needed to grow because when they sold the idea, the actual program started in 1913 when John Mayo um, funded the program, a wealthy baron.
Hmm.
Well,
We've talked about him a few times. John C. Mayo on the
uh,
podcast. He's an interesting character.
well, of course, he passed a year after when
Hmm.
this was the Kentucky Federation of Women's Club, and I believe the May Stanford woman, they, went to him, and he gladly did that. But then it would be almost 20 years later when they would go back to Roosevelt's WPA. And what was so interesting, I think, about it all was that they said, we'll pay these women, these poor, starving women, $28 a month, but they don't get any books, no mounts, or no
Yeah.
no places to house their books. What? So the most oppressed, impoverished area, you're going to give us $28, but that's it. Go bye-bye.
Yeah, no resources or nothing.
But
Here's your job.
yeah, but it just became such an important program that gave empowerment to the poor people, and it was a bridge to literacy and education. So it was a wonderful program. And by the way, we know that Kentucky has initiated all these wonderful initiatives, from the Moonlight Schools to the Frontier Nursing Services, and they were doing some pretty badass things. Can I say that word? I just did.
Yeah, it's fine.
So they were, so, and then you take in the blue skin people, the remarkable historical blue skin people of Kentucky, who were so mistreated and shamed and shunned because of a gene,
Mm-hmm.
and in fact, I have Kentucky librarians. One of the first people that reached out to me were Kentucky librarians, and they were blue skin.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them cried how beautiful the book was and how it honored them. And I said, no matter what comes next, that's all I wanted to do, was to lift these people up and honor them. Because I've talked to them, and I've talked to children of the Pike Horse librarians and so forth. So it's been that I did that. I really didn't care, Jameson, what the rest of the world thought at that time. I mean, I'm so glad it resonated, but for me, that was everything. And even on a bad, crappy day or a bad, crappy review, I knew I would get through that because I did what I set out to do. And I had also dropped seeds of kindness, courage, and compassion into the book. And because it was a 5.5 year everyday toll of anywhere from 14 to 16-hour days writing this and trying to get it right for my Kentucky people, because I knew I was going to be the first one to be writing this history in a novel. And I knew it had to be authentic, accurate. That was the most important thing to me.
So reading a lot of historical novels, historical texts, well, more historical text on my end. I'll find these stories, and they're just captivating because they're real. I guess they really happen. But like you said, this is one of the first books that I know of that's really addressed the blue skin people of Kentucky, the Pack Horse librarians, in a way that, like, I wish it was real. I really do. Like, it's such a good. I wish Cussy Mary was a real person now, because it's so well put together, and like I mean, to me, I would say like flawless as far as like historical. People would read it and they wouldn't know the difference, I guess. But
we've had people believe, of course, our history is real, and that was the main thing getting across, and as well as the blue skin people and the project. But I got to spend time 5.5 years with these folks I'm writing about, and I got also a chance to talk to 2 editors in New York, and they wanted to interview me to make sure I would hide my crazy good, and because they're concerned, and of course I wanted to interview them too to see if I wanted to go with them. And one big publisher said they wanted a complete rewrite, pretty much of what you've got now, and I kept going, that's interesting, all throughout the phone call. Well, that's interesting. And then she got to the point about my language. And I had already stripped it down, because I have to be aware, that the world is reading this too. So I'd already stripped it down as much as I felt comfortable, and any more was going to be totally uncomfortable, totally. And she said, now I'll have to ask my mother about that. Well, wait a minute. You're in New York. You're going to ask your New York mother about my language. So I said, oh, that's interesting. And I hung up and I called my agent and I said, not for $1 million, not for any amount of money. And I started crying. And I just
Yeah.
started, it was so important to me, Jameson.
Hmm.
And, I just cried. I said, I'll trash it. I'll, you know, throw it in the trunk. I will not have this important book be rewritten any other way, rewritten as a romance,
Hmm.
anything. No. So I got the editor I loved and who I knew respected and loved Kentucky. And I could just feel that the second I began talking with her. She started talking about the characters like they were real people.
Hmm. Yeah.
Who's your favorite character? This Paul's my favorite, and I knew, in your heart, this is the person that's going to respect you and your Kentucky people
Hmm.
and history. So that's something.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's I always, of course, biased, of course, but with when it comes to Kentucky stuff, you can very easily, if it's done wrong, or not done right, or is in your case, if something's given up, if you make a concession, I'll change this, or do it in a different way, it can be taken a completely different way. You don't want to paint this, you want to paint a real picture of Kentucky, and you know you have the stereotypes and so forth that people kind of get lumped into, and
Right.
uh,
And I wasn't going to have that. I was going to do it as honestly and as lyrically as good.
mhm. Yeah, and yeah, I mean it's so good. Like, the thing that I always look for, or things that I always kind of get into, are always when the main character, of course, is very compassionate, very connecting, and you want to connect to that person. But when I find, and this is more on the Pack Horse Library project or program as well, as I'm reading the book, Cussy Mary, or in the next one, I'll try not to give up too much information for those people who want to go ahead and read it and not spoil anything. But her daughter Honey, they start this pack horse, their route. It's so interesting to think way back when how people got their books and how literature went. But I would be interested in their stops. I want to know about uh,
Right. Right.
each stop they're making, that character. I want to know more about that character and what's
Uh-huh.
going on in that person's life. And it tells a lot more whenever you're getting into the side characters just as much as you're getting into the main character. Um,
Yeah, and I think the previous editor I was discussing was even not sure that I could take these people with me. Well, what? I've spent 5.5 years. None of these characters, not RC, not Angeline, no one's leaving. There,
yeah,
no one's, and at that point you're thinking, no way. But
yeah.
one of the interesting things, Jameson, is talking to a pack horse librarian's daughter who now lives in Ohio. But her mother passed in 2013 now, I believe. I don't have that number in front of me. But when her mother, Irene, started out, she could either go during the WPA, work as a seamstress, or she could become a pack horse librarian. Well, of course, she didn't want to sew, so off she was. And the first day, the supervisor told her, now, don't you be going up that hill to this certain house.
Hmm.
And we don't want you to drop off any books. Well, 15-year-old Irene, what? No way. That's where she went. And it was a little brothel up in those
Oh,
hills. So she would deliver the books.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I don't know how much people have done research, or know. But I think with the book, it even tells more. Like, yes, they were delivering books, but they were doing even more. I mean, they were kind of opening up, to
Yes.
say the hills, the mountains, to other things. And then they were there helping these people as well. They would do stuff with them. It wasn't just a here's your book, see you later. It was more of a bond, I guess, created between the Pack Horse
Right.
Librarian and their patrons.
And like so many librarians today, they were doing a lot for their patrons. Whether you see the librarians help fill out applications and guide people and through all kinds of things, playing social worker, policing, everything. But these librarians were doing a lot and with nothing, with
Hmm.
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just a compelling story, and well, let me ask you this: if for a listener, what would you recommend to find out just more historical stuff about the Pack Horse Librarian? What would be your number one recommendation?
Well, in the last year, I got to work with the KET PBS folks here in Kentucky and help them out. And uh, I was really desperate to have a program like that because the book was now in schools and in other countries, and I wanted them to have something that was authentic, you know,
Hmm.
and historically accurate too. So it was very important before Hollywood or anybody came and ruined that all. I wanted to make sure we had something that was ours and that was Kentucky. And so I
Hmm.
would recommend that Appalachia Pack Horse Librarian Project on that's currently on PBS,
Hmm.
KET, and I'd recommend it to the teachers and the universities and wherever I can to learn more because you're getting some really nice interviews there with some people that were in tune with it. One of the Pack Horse Librarian's daughters that I was able to introduce the program to. So, yeah, definitely that would be great.
Well, yeah, and I would recommend anybody to check out some of those things to just learn more. I mean, how far did the Pack Horse Librarian um, uh, project or program reach as far as other states? I mean, I know Kentucky. Was it all
No,
across Appalachia or?
no, it was just Kentucky and it ran
Mhm.
from 1935 to 1943, I believe. And now, did other states have their own unique things? Yes. Some people would, go by boats or down creeks or carry it up in wagons and all. But yeah, but only the Pack Horse Librarian project was here in Kentucky.
Mhm. Good.
And the reason too that we got to jump into it because remember we had that program going before then and it was abruptly, you know,
Halted or ended.
yes, of course.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about one of the standout characters, Junior. Um,
Oh yes.
you can't. There's no way we could go throughout this without talking about the show stealer. I guess you could say. I mean, you know.
Junior, we have had a lot of letters on Junior, and she's in both books, though she's going to have some competition in Bookwoman's Daughter, as you know. And but like I said, there were thousands and thousands of hours of research and so forth on the Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. And the last thing I was supposed to do was ride a mule with a friend. And because Junior was my pick, and of course, I had done all my food and, floral and
Hmm.
fauna and everything I
Hmm.
thought I could do. And I was toting, it wasn't a cool bear chase me story or snake, whatever, but they were around. But I was toting some Pyrex dishes down and crumbly old mountain stairs and for this elderly woman, and she turned me around. When she turned me around, I missed that last little step, and the Pyrex went flying everywhere. I broke my arm in 7 spots,
Oh.
and, and it was the day, of course, before I was supposed to go, and nary a scratch on that Pyrex, Jameson.
Oh,
No
well, okay.
AIDS. And then it wasn't 2 weeks later that my husband caught limes, but we had went away and spent a year to further authenticate it. We had this opportunity. I won't get into it now, but to live atop a mountain in a little one-room shack. So I said, I
Mm.
think it's time to go home, and this book is cooked now. So yeah, um,
Yeah.
but it was a long journey, and in fact, I really didn't have any intention of returning to the book, for a sequel or a standalone. For that matter, ever writing again. After my family and I suffered, through the book Woman's Troublesome Creek,
Mm-hmm.
tumultuous and troubling journey, which I don't need to go into. I'd already called my agent and said, I'm not going to write again. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the end. Um, but when I started receiving the countless letters, from readers around the world who were pleading for more of the family's journey, more of
Yeah.
Kentucky. And so slowly and more importantly, I began to realize it could be a healthy way for me to climb out of the personal grief I've been wading through.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, it would become a welcome diversion during our nightmarish pandemic that had just begun to grip the world. So that's how Daughter came about. And my
Mm-hmm.
husband, at one point too, he had come into my office and he had said, you need to keep honoring your Kentucky people. You need to write again. He had tears in his eyes, but so much had happened with the book Woman. It was very trying. So, but then I did realize when the letters started coming in.
Yeah, you had something. Something was, something special for sure. And you know, reading it, I mean, I can understand completely how people just connected to, every bit of it. It's just, I don't know, I can't praise it enough. Um,
Oh,
but
thank
you
you.
know, I recommend it. Especially if somebody has a Kentucky read they want to get into. It's definitely worth it. The other thing, I guess, I was uh, really, I guess, when it comes to which you kind of already talked about, just writing and the process and so forth, but um, it really connects as well to Kentucky because oftentimes you have a family and the son, the daughter, whoever comes next, takes up the family's business, to say in that way, or trade,
Hmm.
and it happens all over Kentucky. Um,
Hmm.
and and when I first, okay, the book woman's an art. I was thinking, which way is this going to go? Is she going to get back up? Is she going to be a book woman? How's it going to go? Or is it going to be something completely separate? And it you know I got a little bit of both, I believe, but
Uh,
it worked.
well, thank you. Again, it was a way to honor the Kentucky people, especially these Kentucky women, who, I had one early reviewer say, well, that's impossible. They couldn't have had these Kentucky women doing all this and all that at that time. Well, they did and more, and it's time
Hmm.
they got credit for them. So I was able to interview, we have a character that's a female coal miner, a female lookout tire uh, fire tire woman, and of course we brought in one of the frontier nursing services. So yes, they were doing all that and more, and that's a Kentuckian for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I've talked often about we always talk about Daniel Boone or so and so,
Hmm.
but nobody ever talks about Rebecca Boone, and she did just as much as all the that he did, um, but it does take some effort or some I guess drive to kind of get people to look at the other side of these histories, that are not spoken of enough, I guess, to say it that way. Um,
Right. That's true. So we had a good time, really honoring those people, and as I said, Junior has some competition, as you know, and so again, it was real fun to do all the research. We have some court scenes in there, um,
mhm.
and I got a very distinguished Kentucky judge to vet those for me. And one of the funny things I did not know is that the judge was telling me I had the gavel banging everywhere in my draft, and she said, "Do you know we don't bang it?" And now she takes care of 700,000 people in the city of Louisville. And
Oh
I said,
wow.
"What do you mean you don't bang it?" I would think you'd have to. And she said,
Yeah.
well, decades ago, this one judge, he banged his, and when he banged it, it scared him in the courtroom so bad because it sounds exactly like gunshot.
Oh,
She
yeah.
said, so I've never banged mine in all my decades. So I said, well, I'm keeping two.
Yeah. Well,
Let
you
me have
know,
two small little bangs.
yeah.
So I'll race the other 1,000,
Hmm.
but anyways, it was wonderful because we started talking about patriarchal laws and old laws, Kentucky laws, and both fell down a rabbit hole in that. And she was able to bring me some brilliant Westlaw cases, and
Hmm.
from there I could, expand and flesh out everything I needed.
Hmm. Hmm. You know, I could go over. I'm sure we could get into many themes. You know, the persecution of the blues, um, the female or the women's rights movement as well. All that stuff. It covers a lot, I guess. And
Mhm.
I mean, when you were writing this, did you have like one? I really want to put this point in, or was it just take as much as you
No,
can get in, or
you mean a book woman or book daughter?
well, either.
Well, no, because like I said, with I'm an older girl, and if I've learned one thing, I've learned to listen and observe,
Mhm,
and from my childhood of growing up in a rural Kentucky orphanage to have foster care, to being homeless as a teen, to
mhm,
starvation and abuses, it's not hard for me to feel deeply, about
mhm,
things and about my people, that other people who have suffered. So it's really an easy thing for me to connect with the
mhm,
sufferings, that are going on. And so I'm really, I don't outline or anything like that.
mhm.
I'm just call myself like a kitchen table author. I'm sitting there telling you that story across from the kitchen table, and as best I know how.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it just I sometimes well you know I feel like from the history perspective of it, I always look when I'm reading some of these books or some of these older stories, I'm thinking, why did they do that? That was so stupid. Why in the world would they have this law? But I always have to stop and remind myself, that was 100 years ago or
Hmm.
more, and people will probably be saying that about us from 100 years from now. Why did they do that? That just
Hmm.
didn't seem right. Uh, but and the book is captivates so many struggles. The struggles of Honey, the struggles of Kasime, and the people around them. It wasn't an easy life, and those things still ring true today. People are struggling, and I can just see how well people connected to it because it's so well, connecting, I guess. I don't know the better word to
Well,
say.
thank you. One of the biggest honors I think we had too with this book was when the U.S. Embassy in Moscow reached out to me several years ago, and the book was picked as their literary translation of the year.
Oh, wow.
And we had an interpreter. So I Zoomed all the libraries and universities over there, and they just loved Kentucky, loved this book, connected so easily. It was just amazing, their love and for the people of Kentucky, the love, how they understood about poverty and
Hmm.
everything. So I will never forget that. We've had people from bars to every church denomination,
Hmm.
uh, to universities and schools. It's just amazing how many people, and isn't that a wonderful legacy to leave for these Pack Horse librarians?
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
they changed people. It's not my
Hmm.
writing, it was their program, and
Hmm.
my blue skin people. But, to teach that kindness and compassion and courage, it was just always in my mind those 5.5 years. I mean, it's true, I can kill people left and right and then pick them up and revive them on the battlefield. But I
Hmm.
think in the end, I have to really be there and do more, always do more, lift up my people, lift up those around them.
Yeah, and the struggles of others, I guess, you can really, well, lifting them up, giving them a story that has hope, ends well. Well, I guess you could say there's a bit of a in the book Woman of Troublesome Creek, a little bit of a well, how's this going to end? And
Hmm.
I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who wants to go read it. But with the
Right. But we have to too remember this too, Jameson.
mhm.
There was no romanticism in poverty,
Yeah,
1930s poverty.
yeah,
And that's, when we go back, and I was talking about that editor that I did not,
hmm,
it wouldn't have been for any amount of money. It wouldn't have, because it would have been a betrayal.
yeah.
Because I'm writing first my history, and though it's a novel, I'm writing my history, and for me and the Kentucky people first.
Hmm. Yeah, and just I always think of the Kentucky stereotypes always pop in my head. But my
Hmm.
wife is from Hazard. Her grandma lived in a coal camp. All those sorts of things. Um,
Hmm.
and you always hear that thing. I didn't know we were poor until somebody told us we were poor. You know,
Yes,
and
nobody. Yeah.
and
You
that's
know,
that's the thing I always kind of connect. And people can, of course, say Kentucky's poor, this or that, or whatever, financially and all that stuff. But I always feel like Kentucky, there's just a lot more heart and family rich, um, richness going on. Not and that in my mind, of course, is worth more than I guess
well,
riches.
right. And, I say this in my notes, but the people of Kentucky are intelligent and proud and passionate, oftentimes misunderstood and sometimes
Hmm.
persecuted. But I think about the Kentucky people in their complicated lives and stories. You'll find dignity. And that is so very true, I found.
Hmm. Hmm.
Of course, I'm a
Um,
Kentuckian, but it's true. And when you hear this from outsiders as well, you know, it's true.
Yeah. So there's a song now for both books. Um, how did that come about? How did you get connected? Did they just say, "Hey, this book is so good, we're gonna write a song," or how'd it go? How'd that go?
Well, long ago, when watching the Justified series, I fell in love with one of their ending songs. Of course, You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive, but I fell in love with the singer. I just never heard the most perfect, jaw dropping rendition, and it's done by Ruby Friedman. And so when I was wrapping up the book of Bookwoman's of Troublesome Creek, I reached out to Ruby, and Ruby read the book and was immediately inspired. And the publisher, hired her to produce and sing a song. So she sang, as she did it. It's on my website, and you can, or on YouTube. And then
Hmm.
we went back again to Ruby. They wanted to do a book trailer, and the book trailer is excellent. And Ruby produced another song, The Book Woman's Daughter, and that just was released May here, and it's been getting a lot of airtime across the United States. And I hope you'll listen to it. Ruby is an LA baby, but she marries perfectly with my book, and she's been, like I said, in the Justified FX series, the Godless Netflix series, Mean Streets, HBO Mean Streets, and more. So Ruby just is just a beautiful voice, beautiful.
Hmm. So the title. Let's think about the title, the artwork of the book. Um, where'd all that? How'd all that? I don't. I guess I'm not too much into the book publishing world and so forth. I don't know the ins and outs. But where does where does all that come from? Did you know? What did you know from the get go? This is the title I'm going with, or
Well, one thing about titles and covers, authors do not really have any say. It's kind of
oh,
worldwide in publishing, because you're not marketers and you're not bean counters, and they really don't want you. But I, of course, had the first title I had picked out was called A Familiar Bluette for the book Woman of Troublesome
Uh-huh.
Creek. And my agent thought, that kind of doesn't sound good. So I said, the borrowing branch. And she said, no, a lot of people won't know what a borrowing branch is, from
Yeah.
the old days. So she said, let's call it Kentucky Blue. And I said, let's not. You're going to get me killed by rabid ball fans if you do that.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they will be burning couches on my lawn. Oh, no, it's okay. So she's up there in New York, and I'm like, she said, I'm going to go ask my colleagues. And I'm like, no, it's not okay. Um, no, no, no. So
Yeah.
anyway, it ended up the publisher came up with it, the Bookwoman of
Mhm.
Troublesome Creek.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
so it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
how it all, goes around.
Well, that was a right move. That was a very conscious move of not going
Yeah,
with that. That would have been.
that you don't mess with ball in the South. You just
Yeah,
can't.
yeah,
It's so
yeah.
funny, but and that's coming from two perspectives. They think nothing, and they don't know. And
Mm,
you have to tell them sometimes, "You're gonna
yeah,
kill me dead."
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Mm. Let people know how they can connect to you. I know there's Kim Michele Richardson dot com they can go to find your other works as well. Social media and all that. How can people get a hold of you or reach
wow!
you?
I have a Kim Michele Richardson on author page on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, and you can see my pups and a little bit of what's going on. And I'm just getting started on the Twitter bug, and we'll see how that one goes. So I'm there, and come and connect with me on
Mhm.
our author Facebook page. We have a lot of fun giveaways and news, upcoming news, and we're going to have some really jaw-dropping news coming soon,
Mm.
Jameson. I wish I could tell you today, but it's unbelievable. So please stay tuned.
Mhm. All right. Well, that sounds good. If you want to connect to Kim, follow those places. Everybody's got social media somehow at this point, but you can get the book at any bookstore. Of course, try to go to your local bookstore if you can, and it's on Audible. You can get that. That's a good question. Do you have any say in who does the Audible readings and so forth, or is that another?
Well,
Uh,
sometimes the agent will retain rights for that, and that meant that we retained the rights for both Bookwoman and the Bookwoman's Daughter, and I got my say. And actually, I've had a lot of praise for this
mhm,
narrator, Katie Shore.
mhm,
She's You're not going to believe where this baby's from. But she did one of my other Appalachia books, Got Pretty in the Tobacco Field, and I
mhm.
fell in love with Katie voice. And anyway, she's a Brooklyn baby.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah,
Whoa.
and we have to talk, and we have to
Yeah.
say this word that way and this word this way. But
Yeah.
and she doesn't you know drop down on it and make it extreme. She just tells it, I think, in a beautiful narration. She just makes my
Mhm.
book shine. So I really
Yeah.
love Katie and was really honored to have her and both her and Ruby Friedman, such young
Mhm.
people, and one in LA and one in you know with helping me with my work.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're talented for sure because I didn't
Yeah.
expect either one of them to be from those parts of the country.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
which my listeners know I have three kids. As much as I love sitting and reading a book, in my hand,
Mhm.
audiobooks are sometimes I just have to go with audiobooks because
Uh-huh.
things get busy. Um,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
but well, that's all I got. Anything else that you would like to bring up and add before we go?
No, and thank you again. It's an honor to be with you today. It's an honor to talk with another Kentuckian
Mhm.
about books, and can't thank you enough for having me on.
Well, we'll have to do it again when the next book comes out, maybe if there's another one, or we'll leave that for another time. And well, we can talk more about pack horse libraries, the blues of Kentucky. I don't feel like we even talked much about the blues of Kentucky, and that's big time Kentucky history.
Well,
Uh,
because, when I began this almost 8.5 years ago, for
mhm,
me, it almost wasn't about, you know, color,
mhm,
religion, anything. It was, how we treat people that are differently.
mhm,
That
yeah,
was the very simple message and what we're all guilty of doing. And it was a way, again, to drop those seeds of kindness, courage, and compassion. And when I handed it over to sold it in 2017, never did I dream it would mirror such a charged and tumultuous world, and that it would
mhm,
resonate, that history happening all full blown, coming full circle.
mhm. And that's the nail on the hammer. Getting that. Uh, because and you said it right there perfectly. Sometimes we get lumped into you know color and race in that sense, but there's also just the how you treat anybody is important, and using that kindness
Right,
and
because
fairness.
yeah, prejudice and bigotry, all that is, it's hate, no matter where it's going or where it's aimed
Hmm.
at, and
Yep.
fear and ignorance breeds toxicity into cultures. And it doesn't have to be honed on one certain thing, it could be anything, from the way
Hmm.
people speak to the way people dress to a physical handicap,
Hmm.
mental disability. It's so many things.
Yeah.
So the
Uh,
picture was much, much, much bigger when I laid it out.
yeah. Yeah. I just popped in another question in my head, but well, I guess we better save it for another time. But yeah, thanks again for coming on. Again, I highly recommend this book, both books. Um, Check them out. They will, if you are a Kentuckian or if you are anywhere in the world, they are worth your read. I promise you. Um, so again, Michelle, thank you for coming on.
Oh,
And
thank you.
we'll do it again. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.